The federal government has been asking the public for feedback on proposed legislation to create a trusted digital identity system. The aim is for Australians to use it to prove their identity when accessing public services. This piece of legislation has largely slipped under the radar since it was unveiled on October the 1st. The government's proposed digital identity system promises a safe, secure and convenient way to prove who you are online every time you access government services. In other words, it aims to streamline your experience by avoiding the need to repeatedly identify yourself when accessing a range of government services. I must say, I've been pretty gullible myself when it comes to giving my face to my tech and stuff just so I can download an app. Currently, you can create a digital identity using a MyGov ID to access 80 government services. This allows you to link your data across services such as Medicare, Centrelink and the Australian Tax Office. The new legislation proposes an expansion of powers to outsource the process of identity verification to approved Australian businesses. Presumably, this could lead to an expansion of acceptance of the digital ID system so it can be used more widely than just to access government services. This would be done by linking your MyGov account on the MyGov ID smartphone app and provide an existing identity document such as a passport, driver's licence or birth certificate to an identity provider. Under the proposal, any Australian business can apply to join the Trusted Digital Identity Framework to become an identity accreditor. The legislation would establish an agency to oversee these accreditations and to govern how data will be handled in the scheme. Oh well, as long as they're completely reliable, we've got nothing to worry about. In fact, don't call it a scheme, this hoax, trick, might as well call it a shenanigan. But this goes against all the standard advice about not linking all your personal information such as tax history and medical history, as it can lead to mass analytics, behaviour profiling, targeted advertising and more, as we saw in the Cambridge Analytica scandal. The proposal also comes amid the ongoing datafication of the population, which has been turbocharged by the COVID pandemic. Digital rights advocacy groups have already voiced alarm at the mass collection, collation and storage of personal data, often on a mandatory basis using hastily implemented platforms such as contact tracing apps. It is opaque on details, particularly with regard to the proposed use of new technologies such as biometric matching, using biological characteristics to identify an individual, and automated decision making. In a sense, it's downloading your data, your identity, into the hands of a machine that will ultimately be ungovernable. In a way, we see this already with bureaucracy that's implemented by the hands and minds of humans. Oh, I'm sorry, I can't do anything about it. It's the system. Computer says no, all that stuff. The more that this becomes automated, the less we'll be able to participate. It becomes like a kind of God in the way that it functions in your life, in that no human authority can intervene or control it, that the system has started, that once that first domino's been toppled, there is an inevitability to the outcome, and it won't lead to more freedom, it won't lead to more convenience for you, it will lead to more freedom for the state and more convenience for the state. Stored in a centralised database that would offer a tempting target for cyber criminals or hostile nations. The government has promised the data will be private and secure and protected by strict security protocols. But government databases have suffered numerous previous hacks, such as the cybersecurity incident last year that led to the Australian Defence Force's recruitment records being offline for 10 days. It's not clear how the trustworthiness of third-party identity verification providers who store this data will be verified and guaranteed, or what recourse will be available in the event of a breach. The establishment of a centralised oversight authority is an archaic approach that disempowers individuals from owning their personal information. What that is a backward step, and we're seeing more and more of this. There's always this assumption of progress, that things are improving, we're getting smarter, we're getting clever, things are getting fairer, more equality, less prejudice, bigotry and judgment. But actually, these are very regressive steps. It's almost like there was an intermediary period around the 60s to the 90s where people were empowered, and now there is the technological means to reassert tyranny. The aesthetics have altered. There's no longer like really scary badges and marches and flags, although there are some. There's just much more slow, bureaucratic, technocratic kind of dampening down of freedom, a slow immolation of personal choice. The broader context here is not one of legislation or technological architecture. It's a social question of collectively defining what a digital Australia should look like in the long term and making it one that serves the public interests. Citizens should be able to own and govern their personal information with confidence both now and in the future. Silky Carlo, director of Big Brother Watch, the idea of digital ID and vaccination checks could easily lead to a health apartheid that few would expect of a democratic country. Digital IDs would lead to sensitive records spanning medical work, travel and biometric data about each and every one of us being held at the fingertips of authorities and state bureaucrats. Like when you see something like this on Black Mirror or in China, you immediately decry it. But can you see how it's incrementally being brought about under the auspices of crisis response? We've got to respond to this crisis. It's necessary. It's better for you. It's easier for you to tax your records. All they've done is worked out that they can't blatantly say, we're doing this because it's easier for us and this is how we're going to control you. But in the same way that Foucault would say that all legislation and law is underwritten by the potential of state violence, we're now beginning to see how this sort of harmless bureaucratic language is actually menacing. It's a behavioural herding and a controlling, a damping down of freedom, an incremental tyranny imposed by 1,000 cuts. This dangerous plan would normalise identity checks, increase state control over law-abiding citizens and create a honeypot for cyber criminals. My hunch is that you're not feeling like you want to hand over more authority, control and private data to the state that in collusion with private business interests can be used against you to impede upon your freedoms and maximise the profit that can be extracted from you and the amount of control that can be exerted over you. Wherever we are in the world, we have an obligation now to commence with a movement where our interests can be protected, carried and communicated. This has become quite quickly an obligation. It's gone from a kind of a preference to, wow, otherwise we're all going to be blithely strolling like Lucy into a dystopic world where we really are just the simian vehicle for our own phones and data, that we are like the kind of butler for our information, that our personal autonomy, our ability to be spontaneous and free in the moment is entirely negated by these systems that, as well as being machines themselves, make us more machine-like.